We're coming in hot with inspiring guests, witty banter, and colorful commentary for today's veterans and military community. This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome back to the Tango Alpha Lima experience. I am Jeff, and you see down there my cohort, Ashley Gorbulja Maldonado. And we have someone else really special here today. You might remember him. He was on last season talking about legislative affairs with the American Legion, and he's back with even more good stuff. This is Lawrence Montreuil, and he's the National Legislative Director for the American Legion in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining the American Legion, he worked for a member of the U.S. House Armed Services Committee as a legislative fellow focused on defense policy issues. Montreuil was a United States Marine Corps infantry officer for 8 years and deployed multiple times during the global war on terror. He still serves in the Marine Corps Reserves as a company commander and has deployed as a foreign military advisor. Montreuil holds a bachelor's of Science in International Business, Trade, and Commerce from State University of New York Maritime College, and also holds a Master of Public Policy from George Mason University. Super impressive, and we cannot wait to get into this little chat. Be back after the break.
The American Legion is Veterans Strengthen America. We're in your community, supporting veterans, service members, and their families, enriching the lives of young people and promoting citizenship and patriotism. Our members are passionate about these core values. Help strengthen America by joining the American Legion today. For more information, go to legion.org/join.
All right, we are back with Lawrence, and I think Ashley, she's been chomping at the bit, so she's going to go first.
That is correct. I am going to go first, Jeff. So, Lawrence, super excited to have you on, and very much so excited to talk about legislative wins of 2021. So, if you could kick us off and tell us about the former legislative agenda that are, items that we had, and then some of the wins that we've had for the year. Let's start it up on the up. Let's do it.
Well, thank you for that, Ashley, and thanks, Jeff, to you both for the opportunity to come back on the show. Always excited to come on and talk to the Tango Alpha Lima audience. So, Ashley, thanks for that question. I love starting off with the wins. So, one of our first major wins of the first session of the 117th Congress was the GWOP Memorial Location Act. And for those of your listeners who aren't familiar, that was to allow the Global War on Terrorism Memorial that was previously authorized by Congress to be located on the National Mall. Formerly, there was some legislation that was restricting any further memorials going on to the National Mall, and we felt it was important with a coalition of other VSOs and MSOs that this be placed in a place of prominence on the National Mall. So in the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, that legislation was passed, and we look forward to when that memorial is going to be built on the National Mall, and service members and veterans will have a place to come commemorate their service and honor those who are no longer with us. On another note, more positive note, another win for us was the Protecting Moms Who Serve Act, which passed earlier this year. That was led by Tammy Duckworth in the Senate, and then in the House, Lauren Underwood. And what that really did was look at two things. Firstly, funding. It allocated $15 million of funding for VA maternity care coordinators, which is extremely important. And then commissioning a GAO report to look at postpartum issues and maternal mortality in the veteran population. So very glad to report on those two wins, and looking forward to getting into some of the other issues that we're going to look at in the second session.
So, Lawrence, I'm really happy to hear about both of our wins, because having a unique opportunity as a post-9/11 veteran to know that there is going to be a memorial that I can take my future children to, that will be a place where everyone who has, put in the time and effort to make this happen, it's just it's going to be incredibly rewarding when they break ground. And I'm even more excited that they were able to kind of go forward and get this on the National Mall itself. I think it's an appropriate place. It's where it should be. And then additionally with, maternity care, I think that is incredibly important for our service women who are, wanting to have families and having a study that commissions to review all of the necessities of care that come from, having children, and being a military family is incredibly important. And I know that we have talked about these topics, on previous episodes. So it's nice to see all of it coming together with a bow, if you will. So I'll toss it over to Jeff.
I wanted to come at this a little bit from a big picture perspective, to use Ashley's word, perspective. I think that both of these are really great examples of us moving forward with the integrity of our mission. So taking care of all veterans is for the second one, the moms who served, because as we move forward, more and more veterans are using the VA as their healthcare choice. It's not just about battle wounds. It's if you qualify, you can use the VA for your total care. And when we have gaps in those care, wherever they may be, it's nice to see that we're filling those gaps. And as far as the global war on terror, I had my reservations, mostly based on the history of you don't have a war memorial. What, you're not remembering it because it's happening right in front of your face. It's still going on. So that was the basis of my thing. But after having a conversation that you see in another episode, I've softened, and so I'm still supportive of it happening now, because I especially the way. Nope, not going to give away. You're going to have to listen to the other show. So when you were when you were lobbying for this, what obstacles did you have for either piece of legislation that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think on the GWAT Memorial, there were some veterans with some hesitancy. As you mentioned, Jeff, I think some of that hesitancy was around the fact that the wars were still going on. I think one thing to highlight there is that the memorial has taken extremely long time to build, and by the time it's built, hopefully these wars will be fully concluded, and it'll be the appropriate time. I think secondly, there was legislation that the National Mall was a completed work of art. It's, if you come here and come walk the National Mall, it's an absolutely beautiful area. Tons of different memorials. Korean War Memorial would be my favorite, but many viewed it as it was starting to get crowded, and just to set it as a baseline that no more memorials would be built there. This way, members of Congress or the administration didn't have to pick winners or losers. It was just, that was it. It was a completed work of art. But we really felt that it was necessary, that it was in a place of prominence, and that veterans from the GWAT generation could come and as Ashley mentioned, come bring their kids there and remember their service and the service of their comrades. But that was really the main boundary, was that feeling that the mall was a completed work of art, and there was alternative places for it.
Did you have any pushback on the moms supporting moms who served?
I think that was generally understood, that providing gender-specific care to the largest the quickest growing demographic at VA, amongst the veteran community. I think by 2045 there should be somewhere around 2.2 million women veterans in the United States, and identifying the gaps, as Ashley mentioned, in the gender-specific care that VA has not traditionally had a robust structure for, is absolutely necessary. And I think that everybody really recognized that. There's some other gaps that are being addressed that I can talk about in a little bit here. But generally, there was bipartisan support for that one.
That's outstanding. Ashley, do you have any more on this?
Well, I'm super excited to hear about the wins, and I'm looking forward to hearing about
What's next?
what's next. What are we doing for the 118th Congress? What's our
Well,
hard
you're in luck,
charge?
Ashley. You're not going to have to wait long. You're only going to have to wait through the break.
So you were discharged with a 20% disability rating, but now you can't hear so well and need help. Contact an American Legion service officer. Service officers are free of charge and they help all veterans. Find one near you with our online tool at legion.org/service officers.
All right, we are back with Lawrence, who's full of information, wisdom, and just general positivity. And he carried us through our wins of the last congressional session. And now I have to ask, with all of that momentum and all of your success, what are you focusing on this congressional session in hopes of more wins?
Yeah, so this will be the second session of the 117th Congress. They go in 2-year intervals. So a lot of the things that we had on the legislative agenda are going to carry over into the second session of the 117th. And one of those that the Legion has been preeminently involved in has been the toxic exposure issue, dating back to mustard gas in World War I, Agent Orange during Vietnam, and contemporarily it's the issue of burn pits. So that's an issue that the veteran community as a whole has been working on extremely diligently for a number of years now, and the fruits of the labor are being seen now. There's a mutual agreement, both bipartisan and bicameral, that something needs to get done in short order on toxic exposure, specifically as it relates to burn pits during the global war on terrorism. And that's an issue that's made a lot of headway, and an issue we're going to be focusing on in the coming months here. Namely, there's 2 bills, and those bills are a lot alike in many ways, but they have some minor differences, and they're really just broken up into the Senate version and the House version. So the Senate version, led by Chairman Tester, is the Cost of War Act, and what that does is a number of things, but importantly, it presumes exposure for any individual who served in a list of countries. So no longer is that burden on the veteran to prove that they were at a forward operating base or combat outpost in Helmand province during these years, and there's burn pits there. With this legislation, the veteran is kind of absolved of that. All they have to say is, I've got an Afghan campaign medal, or an Iraq campaign medal, or GWAT expeditionary medal, and it's presumed that they were exposed to those burn pits, because you'd be very hard pressed to find a veteran who served in those areas and wasn't exposed to burn pits. But it lightens the load on the veteran to prove that and take time to find documentation. So that's one big component of it, is the presumption of exposure. The next is presumptive diseases, just like we saw with Agent Orange, and that list has continued to grow as we've seen more research and more science surrounding the connection between exposure to Agent Orange and some of these diseases. The same thing is seen with burn pits. So there is a list in both bills. The list in the House version is a little bit lengthier. That's 22 different diseases that would be presumed to be exposed to. Not only exposed to, but assume a service connection to the veteran, and then 11 in the Senate version. And that's extremely important because it creates that nexus that, again, reduces the burden of proof on the veteran. So now if a veteran has an Afghan campaign medal, they're presumed exposed to burn pits. And then if they also have one of these diseases, once the bill passes, it's presumed as a result of their exposure to burn pits. So all of that burden of proof is taken away from the veteran. And it's much easier for them to get the benefits that they deserve and that they've earned. And then thirdly, it sets up a framework to conduct studies to identify additional diseases or illnesses that would be service connected. So both that was the Senate version, both the House and Senate version have that same foundation in those three facets. Really, the major difference between the two is the number of diseases that are presumed exposed. So that's really the major difference. And where that is in the legislative process right now is starting to being negotiated amongst the House Veterans Affairs and the Senate Veterans Affairs committees, and negotiated between the two chambers on what the final version will look like. But whatever that final version looks like, it is going to be a monumental piece of legislation that does a lot for the veteran community, and it's going to come much sooner than we saw Agent Orange legislation after Vietnam. So we've learned our lesson a little bit here, not fully, because we still have this toxic exposure issue, but certainly doing a better job of taking care of our veterans. So looking forward to continuing to work on that and pushing that from a legislative perspective. I would also add that Secretary McDonough and his team over at VA have done a fantastic job on the toxic exposure issue and have been extremely proactive. So they went and, without being required by Congress, added 3 presumptive diseases to the list. So asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis. So to all your listeners out there who may have served in the global war on terror, those are now presumptive diseases as VA sees it. So if you can prove that you served in those regions and that you have this disease, that is presumed a service connection. And VA is continuing to be proactive. In November, they announced that they were going to do a 90-day review on certain types of respiratory cancer to see if those could be presumptive diseases as well. So certainly a lot of progress on the toxic exposure issue.
I think I have a couple of takeaways from that. I think first of all, when you have a House and a Senate version, does that double your work, or is the fact that they passed both of those and now you just leave it to the process, or do you have positions on how they should come together?
We do. So obviously we want to see a bill that's as generous to the veteran community as possible. And that's the position we advocate for. But in order to get things done, sometimes there needs to be compromises, and that's really our priority here, is to make sure that some combination of these two bills pass into law. Because no matter what version passes, it's going to be extremely beneficial for the veteran community. And I'm really happy with where we're at now compared to where we were at with Agent Orange, shortly after the end of that war.
And it's kind of super cool that the Agent Orange kind of led the way. We hear a lot of bickering about generational rivalries and things like that. That was, it seems like the more we talk about what's different, the more things are kind of the same. The exposure aspect, and I hope that this has a ripple effect of softening a lot of that animosity that some people have towards different generations. And then when I picked this up, I didn't prepare this. When you were talking about the actual name of the Cost of War Act, you now have a pitch to get the most generous. That's because people love acronyms. It's the Cow Act, and you can ask, where's the beef? Like, you can do that all day and people will roll their eyes, and like they're doing right now. But you have a catchphrase now.
No, I think that's helpful, Jeff. We might have to hire you to do our government affairs marketing over here. But no, that's all kidding aside. That's certainly an approach that we've taken, and that's something we've been very clear with members of Congress on. Is, hey, we're paying for this now, but we wrote this check 20 years ago, and now it's time to pay it. So we're certainly on the same page with you there.
All right, Ashley.
I did have one quick follow-up question. So for the House and Senate, the presumptive diseases, you said there was 11 in the Senate. Mm-hmm. So for the 11, and is it 22 or is it 21?
22.
22. So are there crossovers, or do they, like you say, they have the same foundation, but how come there are less on the Senate side? Or can you explain that a little bit more? I'm
Yeah,
curious
so
because like for someone who would be super novice in like policy who may not understand like why there's less in one and more in the other, and if there's any crossover between the presumptive diseases.
no, there certainly is crossover. There's really the same list that people reviewed and went through and said that there is at least some scientific evidence that there is a connection between exposure to burn pits and this disease. And one thing I would draw out, but before moving on, is that burn pits is unique because everything and anything was thrown into those burn pits. So there is no consistency there as to what chemicals, what kind of JP8, how much JP8, how much plastic, how much tritium that are in our rifle scopes. There's a high degree of variability. Whereas with Agent Orange, there's one chemical compound that we know that causes these diseases. So establishing that connection is much more difficult with the burn pits because of that variability. But there's different levels of scientific evidence in some people's opinions on certain diseases. And some may say that, hey, there's not an overwhelming amount of scientific evidence here, while others may say, no, there's a sufficient amount. So that's the difference between the two. But there are certain commonalities as well.
Okay. No, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that when I understood, and for anyone who's listening or watching, that they also have kind of a grasp on like, well, why is it different in the Senate and the House, and why these decisions, or why they're considering this number versus that number.
I kind of feel like watching that Schoolhouse Rock thing, how a bill becomes a law. I'm just a bill, a lonely little bill. I won't sing it. Nobody's done anything to deserve that. So actually, what's that?
Mandatory part of initial training before you start here at the legislative division. We all sit down and watch that.
All right, so the main focus this year is the exposure, is the exposure area. To me, that shouldn't even be a gap. That's directly service related, undeniably service related, because the service ordered you to put those things in the pits. Service ordered you to stand or be near where those pits are. I'm glad that you are getting great reception from our legislators on that, and I am glad that you are on the front lines for us, not just American Legion members, but veterans in general. So I want to thank you. I know Ashley wants to thank you. Do you want to thank him, or do you?
Well, I do have a quick question.
Oh, you have another question.
I was
so we're not
taking
done.
notes because I'm a super nerd about this stuff.
Okay.
I want to know what's up when people ask me what the American Legion's doing to help our community. So we usually have a Washington, D.C. conference where folks from all over the country, appointees from every state and every department, and we all kind of get together and we go and we visit our House and Senate representatives. And this year, things are a little bit different. And I wanted to see, Lawrence, if you've got any, resources, tools, tips, and kind of give us a segue as to how we can continue to reach out to our representatives to ensure that we are able to, complement all of the great work that you and your team are doing.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Ashley. We are certainly in Washington conference planning mode at the moment. And more details to follow on that, but it will be a hybrid structure similar to the way it was last year. There's some access issues on Capitol Hill, a lot more restrictive than in the past, and hopefully in the future it'll reverse itself. But very difficult to get on the Hill right now. It requires an escort. Not all offices are taking in-person meetings, so we scaled that engagement back a little bit. And what we're trying to do is make sure that Legionnaires and veterans engage their members of Congress in their district. So what we've put together and what we had last year is our Capitol Hill Toolkit. So you can find that on legion.org/legislative. You'll find a little button there that says Capitol Hill Toolkit. And that provides a list of everything that you'll need to engage your members of Congress. There's a place for you to put your address in, figure out who your member of Congress is, get their contact information, get a copy of our legislative priorities, as well as our Know Before You Go video, which is typically done in person at Washington Conference, will be a video similar in construct to the way it was last year, and you'll be able to watch that. It'll be about 15 minutes to give you a little background and more context than the legislative drop sheet has. This way you can articulate our positions a little bit better. But really, at legion.org/legislative, the Capitol Hill Toolkit provides you everything you need to engage your member of Congress, whether it's remotely from a digital or a phone call, or contacting the offices and setting up a meeting in their district office. So for those listeners who may not be familiar, members of Congress maintain multiple offices typically, both here in the Capitol and then back in their home district. And when Congress is not in session, they're back in their home district. So members and listeners can set up meetings either when member of Congress is back in their district or their staff is back in the district, and sit down and have that same meeting that they would have here, and present our legislative priorities and make sure we get those across the finish line.
Well, I think that's an excellent plan of action, and I'm super thrilled that One Legion is creating all these resources and tools. I know it's been an interesting year or two for a lot of us, and continuing to push forward to have our wins and our continued efforts, especially on presumptives and burn pits and toxic exposure. I'm happy to hear that Senator Tester and a whole fleet of folks that are representing us are continuing the good fight along with your team, Lawrence. If you could just very quickly just list out the top priorities that we are going to look forward to that are going to be in the Know Before You Go, but the brochure itself. Yep. And then we're just going to wish the best of luck, and if fingers crossed, and then we're just going to tell everyone to get out there in their communities and check out our resources. So you can just list off our top priorities, and we'll bid you farewell, my good sir.
Actually, I always appreciate the opportunity for that. And I won't take up too much time. I'll hit our top 3, but there should be between 8 and 10 on the actual Know Before You Go video, and then on the legislative drop sheet. But toxic exposures, which I've spoke to at length here. GI Bill parity for Garden Reserve is going to be a topic. So please look into that as you watch your Know Before You Go video, and look at the white papers that are posted at legion.org/legislative. And then another one is going to be citizenship for service. We have a number of resolutions that cover both the military naturalization process, and then the issue of veteran deportation and veteran families of non-citizen veterans being deported. So that's another issue that we are going to be working hard on, amongst others that will be on the legislative drop sheet. So if I can make one final pitch, I would say that while you are at legion.org/legislative, looking at our Capitol Hill engagement toolkit, and then looking at the Know Before You Go video, there will be a button for the Legislative Action Center. I urge everybody to click that button and sign up for our action alerts to get information about when we're running campaigns and when everybody can support the American Legion and the veteran community, get legislation that helps veterans with a simple click of a button. So please visit the Legislative Action Center while you're there and sign up.
I think that's sage advice. I love it. I will definitely be going to the Action Center and making sure that I'm getting those in-time responses to all of the amazing things that you're doing with your team, Lawrence. So on behalf of me and Jeff, I just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing and continue to do to serve our military community.
Yep.
Well,
go ahead.
Thank you for everything you all are doing, and I always appreciate the opportunity to come on. Hopefully next year I'll be here as well.
We'll be counting the wins.
Counting the wins. And you can count the wins, and you can count the wins out there yourself. And you can also click the links that were just bestowed upon you that will also be in the show notes. And by the time you're done with that, Ashley and I are going to be back after this break.
Disabled veterans, disadvantaged children, and military families all need American Legion services. And that old car on your property simply needs to go away. Help us help others by donating your car to the American Legion. It's easy, convenient, and tax deductible. Visit legion.careasy.org today or call 844-4LEGION. That's 844-453-4466.
So Ashley, that was what I would call an Ashley kind of ATT situation there. All the things he spoke about.
Oh my God, you're on a roll. You're just on a roll today. Where's the beef ATT? We get some endorsement up in here. I love it.
So I was be interested to see what stuck out to you as a takeaway.
So the wins were, of course, very, very positive. But I am super excited to see how things are going to play out this year or going into this next session. Just with, of course, everything going on climatically, a lot of stuff. With that being said, knowing our top priorities is toxic exposure, the GI Bill parity, and then the citizenship for service, especially with everything going on with both evacuation of folks and still having allies. I think that there's a lot of crossover. So seeing what gets done from the citizenship for service naturalization, and just the whole fleet of issues that Lawrence kind of touched on, I think will be very important. I do want to do some more research on the GI Bill parity, especially for Guard and Reserve. I know that there were several things a few years ago when I had the privilege of interning with the American Legion. John Kamen, who was with education at the time under Joe Sharp's division, I had an opportunity to look at a lot of National Guard and Reserve issues that weren't getting the same amount of attention as our active duty folks. And then finally, of course, toxic exposure, knowing that there is some singularity and solidarity, if you will, on both the House and the Senate side that are looking at these presumptive diseases in regards to if you have this campaign, medal, therefore, like, we're just going to assume that you potentially have been exposed to this or otherwise. So between the top priorities, excited to see like what happens, but more importantly for me, making sure that Legionnaires know that, the Legion has created resources such as the Capitol Hill Toolkit, the Know Before You Go video, and then just in general having the Legislative Action Center to make sure that your veteran voice is being heard, and for any Legionnaires to know what the resources are in your local districts to speak to your representatives and let them know what needs to happen and what needs not so much like what needs to happen, but like the voicing your concerns in turn will make sure that it's on their radar.
Understood. So. I agree with all of that. And I'll just say real quick, the wins, I'm just competitive in nature and I love hearing the word win with something I'm associated with. I also think that the gaps that they're closing on the medical side are really important. I'm also interested to hear what they're saying about the education of people who served in different capacities, including Reserve and Guard. Interested to read more about that. Actually, I'll let you read about it and tell me what it says, so I don't have to read
Absolutely.
as much.
I will.
You
can
draw
you,
pictures.
For you, buddy.
You can draw pictures for me. So
I will. A little flip book. It'll
so,
be very long. It'll take some time, but I do it
that
for
would
you.
help me a lot. And just the general feeling of goodness that I have, that we have such passionate competence on our side. And it's something that I think these things aren't as well known to our members when we talk about what do we do. And I think every time we talk about what we have done, there should probably be a little follow-up to what we're currently doing. We did the GI Bill. It's amazing. It's awesome. It was groundbreaking. It probably saved our economy more than once. And all you can say so many good things about that. But then some people
There's like
okay.
this gap. World War II now. All of the things American Legion has done. I agree.
All of the things. So there's the history that's important. It gives us legitimacy and all of that. But if that's all you're talking about, your job's done, you could go away. But that's not true, because we are still doing things. And I think, and that's part of our job, is to broadcast the things that we're still doing. So we're doing it. Super producer Holly's making us look good by providing us these topics and things like that. She was waiting for me to slam her, but I wouldn't do that when she's not on camera to defend herself. So I can slam you. I don't know what that plant is, but water it more. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts. Please leave us a review and give us Ashley, how many stars would you like them to give us?
You 0, us 5.
Oh, 5.
Got him. Water my plant. That's a fake plant.
It's a fake plant. That's amazing.
I do have a real one over here, but it needs the sun and love and none of your shade, good sir.
Shade. Wow, with plants. Good one.
Like that.
All right. Apparently I need some help here. So if you have guest recommendation, please go to legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima and click on suggest a guest link. And when you're in that open-ended category, tell us how you're going to support Ashley or I in our ongoing fake feud here on Tango Alpha Lima. And with that, I am going to declare this mission complete.